Dr. Michael Eric Dyson is a Georgetown University sociology professor, a New York Times contributing opinion writer, and a contributing editor of The New Republic and of ESPN's The Undefeated website. His newest book, What Truth Sounds Like, Robert F. Kennedy, James Baldwin, and Our Unfinished Conversation About Race in America, was just published last Tuesday by St. Martin's Press. Joining Dr. Dyson in conversation tonight is Angela Rye, Principal and CEO of Impact Strategies, a political advocacy firm in the nation's capital. She is a CNN political commentator and NPR political analyst. With that, please join me in welcoming Michael Eric Dyson and Angela Rye.
Well, it always feels good to be home. I always rep the 206 everywhere I go. Dr. Dyson, welcome to our hometown. For those of you who do not know, if you don't follow either of us on Instagram, this is my mentor dad. And I'm so elated that he asked me to host this conversation. Dad, you're still the one and only dad, but I have a mentor dad. What I think is so cool about this moment, my family definitely took over the VIP section, which is really awesome. But why it's so special to me, Doc, is my aunt, who's sitting right here, was a librarian, and my love for books really started with her and my mom and dad. So to have her here is just amazing. And then to be trapped behind this bookshelf I can't look at is really frustrating. But I digress. So I just want you all to know that we have New York Times best-selling author. This book has just made the list in the top 20, right? Top 12. So please continue to purchase this book. This is going to be an incredible conversation for me. Reading through these pages, I was like, I have to slow down and highlight stuff. But you're the author of how many books, Doc? 20 books. He still manages to offer commentary on air. He still manages to teach classes at Georgetown. He still manages to be a dad. He does so much. And a grandfather. Does so much. So my first question is very selfish. He just asked me, when am I writing a book? I don't know how he does this. Like, I feel like I don't have time. So for those of us in the room who are aspiring authors, how do you crank these out so fast?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Angela Rye and the Rye clan for showing up like this and y'all coming out in the rain. I'm so proud of this young lady. All right, that's Papa #1, but I'm #2 right behind him. He's like my dad too, and he ain't even that older than me, much older than me. But what a wonderful, remarkable woman this is, right? Angela Rye has made y'all proud. And she reps that 206 real hard. And I know y'all are very proud of her. But she's all across this country, speaking, resisting, encouraging, clapping back on social media. Man, she's my role model. I often can't say the stuff she says, so I just troll her pages to see what she's saying when she gets back at people with both elan vital and grace and dignity and sometimes black sassy womanhood. I love that. But so brilliant, so gifted, so remarkable, and so deeply committed to our people unapologetically. And when she's on television, you know, you see her as she is. You know, people often ask me, man, is Angela? I said, she's been like way since I known her. She ain't changed at all, right? Whether she's rolling her eyes or rolling somebody's head after a rhetorical defenestration. That is, cutting head off. But she's brilliant and gifted, and I'm so proud of her, and I love her so much. Give it up for Angela Rye.
You did not escape the question. How do you crank these books out so fast?
Well, you know, I'm a fan of sports, and you got to have discipline, you know? Kobe, LeBron, Venus, Serena. Because busy people get stuff done, right? Isn't that interesting? Right? Like you are, just extraordinarily busy, but you do other stuff, right? I hesitated to even ask her, but I wasn't going to ask anybody else to come here. But you know, you've got to carve your time out, and you got to say no to stuff. You know, because I write in spurts, so I write for 15 hours a day. And part of it is just staying in that seat, riding that beast in that saddle. You know, because you're looking at that empty page, it's tough. It's cursing you, laughing at you, ha ha ha, you thought you could do it, but you can't do it this time again. And it's always a new challenge to write
experience that after book 19.
Oh yeah, you're just in there. And I'm trying to raise my game up. I'm trying to get better every time. I'm trying to be like, you know, LeBron's playing out of his mind. I'm sorry I got the basketball on my mind. You know, I know you're
You should find a Golden State Warrior to talk about. You're on the West Coast.
Wow. Well, one of them left the Seattle Supersonics.
Wow. That's really shady.
I'm just saying, Katie, all right?
You know what? This is about the book.
So, they sure did. Ain't no doubt.
Eddie Ride's on the panel tonight, everybody.
He might as well be. I want him to talk. So the thing is that you got to figure out a way to raise your game up every time. I want to get more eloquent, more clear, more incisive, more powerful, you know, and be unafraid of wordplay and the like. So, you know, I try to challenge myself every time. And I love writing so much. I mean, I love the process of it. I love the editing of it. My editors now know, like, man, they give it back to me to edit myself, which is a compliment because I'm going to be pretty heartless. I think it was Dr. Johnson a couple centuries ago said, you know, the greatest writer is the one who can take his or her most cherished phrase and cut it out. Wow. And if you can do that, then I think the commitment to writing is something that's great. So I just love doing it.
Okay, so he just mentioned wordplay, so now I have a question for the audience. How many of you all are Dr. Dyson readers? You have a Dr. Dyson book. Okay, that's good. That's very good. How many of you all, tell the truth naked and not ashamed, truth before God, how many of you all have had to break out the dictionary and or the thesaurus? That wordplay is gangster. It's real serious. Okay. I just want you to know you can break it down a little bit lower for the basics among us.
I mean, look, you know, my pastor told me, Dr. Frederick George Sampson, and I see Sister McKinney here tonight, and of course Dr. McKinney, one of the great pastor preachers in this nation, and we celebrate his life. But my pastor told me, in a congregation, you got folk who like filet mignon, you got folk who like middle level stuff, and you got folk you got to put it where the goats can get it. So I'm gonna say it 3 times. I'm gonna say it in different ways, right? I got filet mignon people to feed, sorry vegans. I got mid-level people, and you got folk on the ground, and it's different moments, and it's different acts, and it's different books. So, you know, God loves you just the way you are, but God loves you too much to leave you that way. You gotta challenge you. And my mama told me, if you don't know it, Ray, just look it up. And then, y'all, Google? I didn't know Google. We had to go to the library, as they say. And we had to go to the dictionary. And I don't want to be an obscuritist now. I don't want to do that. But I do want to sprinkle those sentences with words that in their unusual placement spark curiosity about what it means. But context clues give you a sense of what it is. But I'm also using words that people use against us. Us being common humanity and progressives and stuff, beating up on us. You know, a young cat came to me, you know, sometimes you use words I don't understand. I said, I use them to defend you against people who don't understand you. Wow. And I know they be using them.
Tweetable moment, break out your social media, it's acceptable.
And that's what I'm doing. So I'm trying to be clear and powerful and eloquent, but every now and again to have some punch and some sass to it as well.
Okay, so let's dive into this book.
Mm-hmm.
So this book, to me, so far, is historic, yet it's prophetic. You're speaking to the signs of the times as they are right now and where we will be if we're not careful.
Right.
And so I really want to understand how a reflective piece like this brings us right to where we are at present day. What was your thought process in saying this is a story that needs to be told right now because it couldn't be more timely? Right,
that's a great point. You know, I wanted to read a book about this story and I couldn't find one. I was like, man, I mean, what a great story, right? I had heard about it. Eric Belafonte is a friend of mine, so we rib each other. He's an incredible man, the greatest entertainer, activist ever. I mean, just bar none, 20th century, right? Paul Robeson was great, that was his inspiration, but he was on the front line, had more success than most other entertainers, and at his height, defended us, spoke for us, progressives, black people, people whose backs are against the wall. He didn't wait till, you know, he was a has-been to kind of have a comeback album. He was doing it at his height. He was the first entertainer to, not black entertainer period, to sell 1 million records on an LP, right? Harry Belafonte, Calypso. And while he was at his height, he was on the front lines. Paul Robeson, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm, doing his thing. So he was an incredible guy. So, you know, he had told me about the story. I'd read things about it. I was historically curious, but I was like, man, nobody's ever done like a book on this to tease out the implications of it. I said, well, heck, ain't one. I'll write one myself. And so that motivated me to write this book. And look at the lineup. I mean, James Baldwin, Harry Belafonte, Lena Horne, and Lorraine Hansberry. That's just that's incredible. And we talk about, to your brilliant point, this is why you get a brilliant intellectual like Angela right here, because the intersectionality of it was way before that term was even in vogue, right? Because Lorraine Hansberry, barely in the closet, trying to come out, writing, you know, letters to the only magazine dedicated to lesbian identity in America, signing them with a different name, right? Pseudonymously. And then she got married, but then got divorced, and working through her own politics of sexuality, and talking about, you know, gender as well. Because in that meeting that they had with Bobby Kennedy, and as you know, the book is based on a famous meeting with Bobby Kennedy, and Kennedy wanted to know, you know, why is it that black people are attracted to all this rage? Why are they so angry?
Wait, you're skipping ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right. So I wanted to write a book that dealt with that issue, that dealt with that meeting in a way that could explain what's going on now. So as you say, I link what was going on then to Trump right now. I link the artist to what's going on right now with Jesse Williams or Jay-Z and Beyonce. I link what was going on in terms of activists.
All the way ahead.
Okay. So that's why I did it. I wrote it because I wanted to read it.
Okay. Well, we ended where we started. So now here's my next question.
Right.
This also seems like somewhat of a sequel or a part 2 to Tears We Cannot Stop. Was that intentional, or is this just like your stream of consciousness pulling all of these things together?
Wow, were you like in the meetings? I mean, I didn't see you there. I didn't see you in the editorial meetings. Like, wow,
that means I'm on to something,
yeah,
people.
Big time. Yeah, it is, right? They wanted even the look of it to be a kind of sequel to Tears We Cannot Stop.
Do you all have Tears We Cannot Stop?
I do.
Okay, if you do not, both books will be available for purchase before 8 p.m. You'll sign them both, right?
Everyone you steal to buy.
No stealing. No stealing.
So, Tears We Cannot Stop, a sermon to white America, pretty self-explanatory. I'm trying to talk to white people explicitly about what's going on. And it was my delayed response of Malcolm. You remember when the white woman came to Malcolm, young white girl, heard him in Boston, then followed him all the way to New York because she was so taken by him. And then she asked him, what can I do to help with the movement? You remember he famously said, nothing. You know, and black people kind of laugh at that because, you know, it's cathartic. Like, man, but that can't really be the answer.
It's not the answer.
How you gonna tell white folk who are interested and curious about it? And I know I have many of my students, and I get it. They come to, man, I didn't come to school to be, you know, educating white folk. I got enough work to do myself. And I get that, because that ain't their job. So, you know, I caught myself one day saying, you know what? I didn't come here to educate people. Oh yeah, that is my job. I actually, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I got caught up for a minute. That is my job. Right. That's right. I believe explicitly in educating white folk. Right. No, that's, you know, I'm at a historically black college called Georgetown. Right.
Yeah. Say it one more time for the people in the back.
Yeah.
Historically black college called Georgetown. Tell them what happened in case they missed the news. Just briefly, the quick version.
272 enslaved people built that university.
Built this joint for free.
Exactly right. And now we're trying at least to redress that by allowing them in on the same level as a legacy admittee, although I want to see them, give them some money, because you got dough from them. Go on and do that. But a lot of brothers and sisters ask me, how come I ain't in Howard? You know, ask me how they black school. I said, I love black schools. I sent all 3 of my kids to black schools, right? Morehouse, Spelman, and What was the other one? I paid all
Another
that money.
one.
Another one, that's right.
HBCUs,
There are
that's all
three
that
HBCUs, right. Hampton, I'm sorry. And I just gave the graduation speech there a couple years ago. So I believe in them, but we got to be everywhere. First of all, ain't no black school ever invited me to teach. That's number one. They read the paper like everybody else, and I ain't mad. Everything ain't for everybody. But secondly, we got to be in those places and spaces where white folk are, and there's enough black people there as well. So I get a lot of hate mail from white people, especially some of the parents, ostensibly, supposedly, of these kids, and they're like, you're just trying to warp our kids' minds, you're horrible, and I'm going, yep, I'm trying to rewarp them from the warperization you done put on them. And so I want to speak to white kids, I want to talk to them, I want to lift them up, I want to challenge them, I want to embrace them. So that book was to them, and this book is a sequel in the sense that book talks about race and white America, dealing with white privilege, acknowledging what white privilege is, and arguing with white people who say they have no privilege. And I say one of the greatest privileges as a white person is to meet a cop and live to tell about it. And we tend to forget this. Jim Crow didn't mean every white person would be rich. It meant that the people who would be rich would be white. See what I'm saying? Jim Crow doesn't mean every white person will go to Harvard. It means that only white people will go to Harvard. You still got to do your work. It doesn't mean that automatically you hooked up. That's still white privilege. Just because you're a poor white person doesn't mean white privilege ain't real.
Doc,
right?
I got some more questions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So
that's what I was talking about in that book, and this one is a continuation of that.
So this, I really want you, I can only have you read two because the rest of them are screenshot on my phone. You did fight me on getting a hard copy of this book, and I fought you back. But for the sake of this, and because your voice is far less annoying than mine, I would like for you to read this passage starting at, as a 9-year-old, to give in, please. And then I have a question.
Okay. As a 9-year-old kid, and by the way, your voice is beautiful. As a 9-year-old kid in the Detroit ghetto, I was drawn to the television screen to view the funeral. I was just beginning to understand of Dr. King. I was just beginning to understand my blackness, just learning that it existed, and it was essential in a world where whiteness loomed as an unknowable force. I had never gone to school with white kids, had rarely even interacted with white folk outside of the neighborhood business owners for whom my father and eventually I worked. I didn't know what they liked or how they thought of the world, how they handled their disappointments, or whether they, like us, laughed at misery to keep from crying. I was only starting to sense that white folk may have feared us as much as they didn't like us. It seemed vaguely tied to how we refused to bow in the face of suffering, and how, despite their doing the worst they could imagine doing to us, we refused to give in.
So this piece is really powerful to me because you're talking about understanding racial constructs at 9 years old. And it's through black rage. Like you're watching Dr. King's funeral upon the assassination of Dr. King, and your first realization of racial constructs and racism is through the lens of who at that time was one of our biggest heroes. Not celebrated and recognized by the white community at all. Like his approval numbers were horrible. Like worse than Trump's. Right now.
Oh, far worse.
But understanding that this is your first interaction with race, and understanding whiteness through, like, from a very distant lens.
Right.
How did that impact you, and how did your journey about understanding racial constructs and racism evolve over time?
Wow. Yeah, you be asking me them deep questions. That's profound. You're so right. That was my introduction to racial difference. That and the summer before was the uprising, rebellion, the riot of Detroit, 1967. And there were dirty trails of smoke in the sky, and I asked my mama what that is. And she said, you know, that it was a riot and that there was a dirty pig involved. I was like, a dirty pig? What does an unwashed mammal have to do with, right? Then a blind pig is what they call a blind pig, right? I didn't know it was an after-hours joint where black people attended because they had no, clubs in the place, so they had their own.
See, I thought the pig was a police officer.
Right.
Sorry, Dad. Not that you call all police officers pigs, but I'm sorry.
Well, she be putting us all out there, Doc. Don't worry about it.
No, but I was really like, wait, what happened? Sorry, Dad, don't turn red. You say that in quoting other people.
So the blind pig was out there. My mama told me about it, but when King got killed, I never will forget it. I was sitting on the living room floor watching the news. My father in his big seat, the favorite chair behind me. And the newsman came on and interrupted the normal program and said, Martin Luther King Jr. has been shot, wasn't killed, shot in Memphis, Tennessee. And my father just went, It was one of those deep, bone deep, stomach deep. You know, you ever read E.B. White about Charlotte's Web, right? But he talks about tears so deep, he called them in tears. You can't even cry. He says they're hemorrhagic tears. They hemorrhage on the inside. It's just deep in tears. And that's how my father just, it was agony, pathos. And I never heard him. I said, Martin Luther King? What? I asked Mom, which one is it? I may not get there with you. I knew it. But I want you to know tonight, we as a people will get to the promised land. I was stunned. Like, wow. But listen to those words. Listen to how powerful he was. And then they announced he had been murdered. So the next day, I took all of my allowance money and I sent off for a 45 of his compilation of his best speeches. And so I was 9 years old, and you know, y'all don't know what a record player is, but you know, you have this little wax thing that unravels with a needle put to it, crack, hissle, and pop. And I listened to all those speeches. If you want us to end our moves into communities, open these communities, right? And all the night before he died, the stuff when he first started, all of these speeches, I memorized them, right? And listened to his voice. And so that changed my life. I didn't know what race was. I didn't know what racial difference was. I was in an all-black universe. I was in Detroit, Michigan. Not going to school with white folk, ain't interacting with white people at all. And so the world was black to me. It was Wakanda. And Detroit at that time was, really. We had a first black mayor, Coleman Young, a little later on, 73, 74. And so Kenneth Cockrell, no disrespect to Johnny Cochran, but Kenneth Cockrell was the baddest black lawyer, used these big words. He and King and Malcolm influenced me most in terms of word usage. Because he called, and you can get this, I'm not making this up and no disrespect to anybody here, he called the judge, a white judge, a hunky MF to his face. And then used a lot of big old words after that. And won the case and got him off. I was like, that's true. Who is that? I love that guy, and he influenced me. So Martin Luther King Jr., introduced me to racial difference, and I'll tell you how deep he influenced me personally beyond my vocation and how I saw myself. You know, we had an upstairs balcony in our ghetto house, and that's where the bathroom was. It was off of, a balcony was off of it, and I was scared for 2 years to wash up in that balcony because I thought if they killed him, they would kill me too. So it deeply impacted me. My brother said, "You dumbass, you ain't famous, nobody know you." You know how edifying brothers can be. I'm like, everybody know you? But I was that vulnerable that it impacted me so much. So he was the introduction to me of racial difference. And as you said, racial constructs, understanding how race and racism operate, how difference operates, how being black operates. And I started giving speeches in public. I was 9, at 11 years old. I won an oratorical contest, and from there, just been speaking in public since then. But he influenced me to that level.
So another one of, I think, our celebrated heroes, you talk about James Baldwin quite a bit. And there's this other passage. After this, you will have to download the book on Audible to hear Dr. Dyson. But I do want you to read this passage also. I think it's really powerful.
Okay.
Right here, starting here.
Okay. America, Baldwin believed, was split in two, not between North and South, but between the powerful and the disenfranchised. Racism, that scourge that beclouded our democracy, remains the nation's greatest peril. But the powerful maintained the status quo by sowing discord among the disenfranchised. Poor white folk, rather than uniting with their socioeconomically oppressed brothers and sisters against the rich, trained their ire on poor black folk. They channeled their anxieties into a vengeance against blackness.
So powerful. Yes, that is worth clapping for. But what's really worth clapping for is us finally getting the revelation that that is the strategy and it hasn't changed, right? So this is James Baldwin's belief, but this was also Dr. King's operation, the strategic operation for the Poor People's Campaign, right? Like this is that. So what is it going to take for us to understand that the us versus them, you're really not us, you're really them.
That's right, right.
And us is for a powerful, small group of extra rich folks. Yeah. That if they can keep you desiring that American dream that's unattainable for the masses,
right,
you're going to keep otherizing them even though you're absolutely a part of them.
That's right. No, that's big. You just said it. I ain't even got the answer. There it is.
No.
There it is.
You got bigger words. You got bigger words.
No. Otherizing. I like that. That's a good big word.
Yeah, I made it up. It'll be in the dictionary soon.
Ariism. So, you're absolutely right. Martin Luther King Jr. is in jail, Birmingham. Jailers come to him. They have the nerve to say this to him, right? They literally said this to him. They said, Dr. King, segregation is right. Integration is wrong. You're on the wrong side of history. And he's sitting in jail, right? Just before he's writing the letter from Birmingham jail. And he said, no, it's not. He said, integration is right because it's moral and just, right? And then he asked them, how much money do you make? And when they told him, he said, hell, you need to be out here marching with us. For real, he did. And so that's your point in a nutshell, right? That this Manichaean distinction, us versus them, you ain't us. You ain't who, Mr. White Man? You're not in part of that whiteness. Whiteness is diverse, right? There's a difference between being from Kennebunkport, Maine, and being from Arkansas, right? There's a different. Slick Willie was a different kind of white because it was particularly black and white, right? Mama got a streak in her hair, went to the races, smoked cigarettes, signifying blackness culturally. That's why the South always, they shared culinary desserts. They shared hog mugs and pig and barbecue, even music. White folk called it country, black folk called it blues, right? And if you listen to the lyrics, what's the difference? Hank Williams was one of the greatest poets in the 20th century. Died at, 29 years old. Otis Redding dies at 26. Same genius, right? And then you listen to some of those lyrics. If I'd have killed you when I met you, I'd been out of jail by now. One of my favorite country songs. Right?
That's dark.
And talk about how his wife cheated on him. He said she had a ring on her finger but time on her hands.
That's poetry.
Right? I mean, all my exes live in Texas. That's why I live in Tennessee. So we shared that culture, right? But what happened? The division between us, making white folk think that it's the Negro who's your enemy when it's really the white man who's above both of us. So when you think about it, 1935, W.E.B. Du Bois, Black Reconstruction, the psychological wage of whiteness. Because at least we ain't a nigga. You done took my, what did LBJ say? He said, if you can convince the poorest white man that he's better than the best black man, he said, you can pick his pockets. He said, hell, if you can really make him believe that he is better than any black person walking, he'll pick his pockets for you. Look at what's going on right now with the working class white folk and Donald Trump. He ain't your friend. So to Angela Rye's point, that the exploitation of poor white people is what motivated also Dr. King in part to understand the Poor People's Campaign, which is about Latinos, right? Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King, trying to come together, bringing poor white people together. But he also understood the degree to which white people could be exploited because of their racism. And if you could overcome the racism, this is what he meant. Overcoming racism will not only help black people, it will help white America. Because imagine if working class white folk got over some of the bigotry that's encouraged and they linked up with red, black, brown, yellow people. We could turn this mother out. And it would be a revolutionary thing. So that's what the Poor People's March is built on. The campaign is built on what William Barber is extending right now as he goes throughout this country. And Martin Luther King Jr. understood that in a fundamental way. And in understanding that, he tried to put forth an argument and an agenda that acknowledged who we are as black people, but acknowledged that we got ties with other people in terms of economic and in social injustice.
So, this is my second and final selfish question. There is an excerpt in the meeting chapter where you talk about the Democratic Party and Black voters.
Right.
And I feel like you cut my heart open and just use the blood from it to type it on the page. I know that's graphic, but this really hurts.
Beautiful metaphor.
Hence the dilemma Black voters perpetually face. How to effectively argue for their just reward for loyalty to a party that often takes them for granted while keeping its eyes on the disaffected white voter who might potentially bail in resentment of the few benefits offered to Black folk.
Right.
It's the truth, Larry. It's the truth. So my question for you is, just to keep it all the way 100 people, I know we have allies in the room so they'll understand. Do we need our own party?
Yes.
You know, I mean, I've been seeing you write about this, and I saw you talk about your loyalty and not up, that it's not going to be automatic anymore. Can't be. It cannot be automatic anymore.
And just for context, this is a question or a statement that you're making in the context of this meeting in the 1960s.
Right. When we had
It's 2018.
Come on now. And not only that, check this out. What kind of political power Negroes had in 63? Most of them couldn't even vote.
Yeah.
But they're still trying to leverage whatever advantage and gain Black people got against the perceived value of white folk who had abandoned the party, the Reagan Democrats, right? That would come 20 years later. So already in 63, they're trying to tell Baldwin and Jerome Smith, an activist who was there, and all those other people that, and Bobby Kennedy said, look, we don't want to alienate these white folk who we want and need to come back to the party because we got an election in 64. Remember, his brother wouldn't live to see it. We got an election in 64, and we don't want to really ruffle the feathers. And it's really problematic. Now here's the dilemma we face. That's why it's a dilemma. Think about, 72, Dr. Rye, Nation Time, what time is it? Remember Jesse Jackson with the big fro, right? And talk about what time it is with Baraka, Black people join together in political power. The problem is that Black political power is almost inevitably contingent on a broader society within which it exists. I don't mean permission to be Black and do what we want to do. But when, Black people used to say, let's have 8 states. Give us 8 states. Well, which ones you talk about? And what 8 states you talking about? How you going to run it? And when it happens, what's going to happen? That's why we love Wakanda so much. Because Wakanda is a utopia, a Blacktopia, that idealizes for us what we would like to see happen. It's not that we hate white folk at all. They don't even matter. Right? No disrespect to white brothers and sisters who are here. You matter very much. But don't matter in the sense of determining our future. We're not dependent upon you. We ain't asking you for nothing. We ain't trying to get nothing from you. We got vibranium. We're going to save you.
It's free of colonizers.
Free of colonization, free of colonizers, free of white dominance and supremacy.
Yeah.
White folk are human beings on par with Black folk, so our interactions with you are utilitarian based on what we need from you as opposed to what we got to have from you. Why is that important? Because in Black political power, it's extremely important to understand that we do control certain resources. 10 days before he died, Martin Luther King Jr. said, be careful. To a rabbinical assembly of America, where he had been introduced by Abraham Yasha Heschel, the great Abraham Yasha Heschel, the great rabbi, he said, as the moral leader of America, he introduced King. But as Angela Rye said, King was at the low point, the nadir of his popularity. For the first time in 10 years, he was not named one of America's most admired men, right? On the Gallup poll. No American university basically wanted to hear him lecture, very few. No American publisher would publish his book. His own alma mater didn't even put him on the board of trustees until 2.5 years before he died. Why? Because Merrill, the white man who was the head of the board, the white man who was the head of the Black College Board, Merrill Lynch, he said that King was a poor role model. Why? Because he went to jail too often. He wasn't selling crack. He was trying to crack the edifice of American white supremacy. But the point is that what King said those 10 days before he died, he said, be careful as Negroes integrate ourselves out of power. Yes. He said, because we ain't got much right now, but what we got is ours. And we can hold on to it. Our black colleges, our black universities, black churches, all right, the whole thing. He said, but if we integrate without power, we lose what we got, and then we ain't got what we hoping for. So in that sense, yes, we got to generate our own black identities and parties. But I don't know if a political party will function so much as what has done for us so well, even though it's problematic, even though it's extremely, extremely under assault. But the black church remains a very viable political institution for us that realizes as close as possible what it means to have blackness and to put black folk at the center of our universes. Because I think we have to give up the notion that black people have to have unity. You know, people come to me all the time, when are we going to get together? Never, because we ain't got to. Because you and Clarence Thomas ain't going to never see eye to eye.
And Clarence, just for the record, Clarence does not count.
But I ain't mad at you.
We traded him for 10 wives or something. Anyway.
Can we get Steve Kerr and Popovich and we trade a whole bunch of
Yeah, that's true. We'll take Steve Kerr.
But check this out though.
Yeah.
But see, my point though is, but here's how it gets whittled down. I used to have a radio show, right? 3 hours a day.
I know, because you're not even letting me ask.
All right, but wait a minute, let me tell you this one thing that used to bother the heck out of me. So black folk would call up on the radio show. Okay, unity, get together. I said, cool. And I said, but gay people too? Well, stop. It's always an asterisk. It's always a qualification, which let me know that we got to get with people who get with us who happen to be black. You see what I'm saying? I mean, deliberately black. I don't mean happen to be black in terms of their blackness, but all black folk, not just Clarence Thomas. There are all ranges of black folk who will never see eye to eye. You got to get with the black folk with whom you see eye to eye. When people follow, all the people that follow this young lady right here, now you could put up some other people who like don't follow it. That's cool. Who are the people who follow me? The people who believe in me, the people who follow King. Every Negro didn't follow King, right? Every Negro did not follow Malcolm X. Every Negro didn't, right? So you got to get with who you understand to be the ideal expression of what you are. Let me tell you how tricky it is. I just got finished debating Jordan Peterson over in Toronto, right? White guy, all these incels, like we're upset. You know, white boys who can't get sex, and as a result of that, they kill people in mass murders. I know that's reductive, but that's really an argument that's going on there. Because they are denied legitimate access to intimacy, they
God,
end up
this is not in the book.
Right, I know that. I'm giving you a remix. This is the remix.
Okay, so
but let me say this about Jordan Peterson though. So I get over there and talk to Jordan Peterson. I'm arguing with him. I'm debating with him. I call him a mean man, white man, and he's mad because he's talking about us as snowflakes and whiners. I said, there's enough wine in these white men here to open up a vineyard. That's how much wine y'all got. So wait a minute now. So I'm fighting the white man, right, against it. I know it's 99.9% white audience in Toronto. When they vote, they say he and his partner won against me and my girl. I told him we ain't gonna win this debate. We got to speak to a broader audience. I said, because you ain't coming to we having a heavyweight championship on your terms with your referees. But that's how cold we are. We're going to go over there and whip your ass. But check this out. The Negroes.
It's not in the book.
It ain't, but this is a remix. The Negro, but this is answering your question about black unity. The black people there, some of the black people, man, saying, what, you know, black people, why are you coming to Toronto? And why are you talking about black? Well, wait a minute. Was I wrong about the diaspora? Did I miss that lesson about transnational blackness? So first you mad at Negroes in America for being American-centric, like this is the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
Now I take you seriously enough to come to your terrain, not uninvited, right? To engage in serious dialogue. Now I got to deal with Negroes trying to hate on me because I'm coming from, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm saying that the ideal of black unity is a beautiful fiction. What we have to work with is forging connections with people of conscience and color who believe what we believe. And I think in that sense, we can remake those parties from within as opposed to merely generating another. That's what I'm saying. A long way to answer that. That's a long way to answer your question.
Okay, so now I want to ask you this because you just talked about partnering and linking up with conscious people.
Right.
So you also address allyship in this book. We're only in chapter 2. Like, people are gonna have questions,
right?
But you don't care about my questions. That's what you know.
Okay, be quiet.
you give some instructions about allyship based on the conversation that was had with RFK in this meeting.
Right.
You offer and level a critique about RFK in his interactions with Black leaders in this meeting.
Right.
Can you quickly walk us through that? Because I have one more question, then I want to open it up to the audience because the hour is late.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you know, RFK wanted Negroes to be grateful. Let's just break it down. Basically, he showed up thinking, as many, even white liberals do, be grateful for what we're doing for you. Now, we know John F. Kennedy was tricky. The Kennedys gained reputation in death more than they earned it in life.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? And I love the Kennedys, but I'm just being real on that tip. John F. Kennedy put on the bench Harold Cox, who called black people niggas from the bench. John F. Kennedy, when he called Ernest Vandiver, the governor of Georgia, and got King out of jail, remember that's why Negroes voted for him, who could vote? You know what he told him at the same time? We will not use federal authority to go against segregation. So my point is, the Kennedys were tricky. He went there, he wanted black people to be grateful, they lit him up. They said no. He said, you're more interested in witness, I'm interested in policy. No, black people, it's not that Baldwin in them, and this is one of the principles I articulate, it's not that Baldwin and his confreres were not interested in policy. They understood that policy by itself that doesn't deal with anti-blackness is useless.
Yeah.
It's already on the books, you ain't supposed to kill unarmed black people.
Right.
That's already on the books. But the anti-blackness that motivates people has to be addressed, not just the policy. The law against lynching is real, but they still lynch Negroes. So what Baldwin and his people understood is that you've got to talk about, here's the second point, you got to talk about race not as a political issue, but as a moral one. Right? Not just political, but moral. And they were fighting each other because Baldwin and his friends said, use your pulpit as a bully pulpit. Let the presidency ring out against the vicious bigotry that is going on there. And thirdly, now in here, what Baldwin and his friends wanted to do that day was to make certain that they held white brothers and sisters to account for what their privileges were. And, you know, Lorraine Hansberry at one point said, if you don't understand us, and you're a relatively awake white guy, what are we going to do with the rest of the people in America? And she said, if you are our hope. You are the person that we believe in. Let me tell you what else she did. I was at this one layer. She said, hello.
University bookstore will be closing in 10 minutes.
Come
Is that
on.
right?
That's, you know what, that's okay because you stopped, so I'm just
Right.
gonna ask you a new question.
All right.
Okay.
No, let me tell you one thing she said. One thing she said. She said that black men who have anger look like to me they're gonna be all right. She said, but when I see that picture of that Birmingham policeman with his foot on the neck of that black woman, that's what I'm worried about. You talking about intersectionality in 1963? That's how far ahead she was. That's the kind of stuff they put on Bobby Kennedy that day.
So the thing that I loved about this moment is you talk about how white allies, some of the things that they can do best, because earlier you referenced the Malcolm X speech, which was nothing. It was sitting and listening,
Yeah.
like really observing and understanding what the struggle really
Yes.
looks like through a different vantage point.
Yep.
We know that there are not too many allies, maybe none, in the Trump administration.
Right.
But recently we've had someone that decided to change teams, so to speak. I'm talking about the new Kanye. And so since you have a chapter addressing the role of artists, and that's your boy,
Why sway?
because I have to ask something provocative because you wanted to answer my questions long. So he said slavery was a choice. My question is very simple. Is the old Kanye gone forever?
I followed you on social media. You were killing him. What is own quote? This is what I loved about you. You were killing him with his own quotes. You were just like throwing his, and I want to do a whole article doing that. Just like, oh, Kanye, the person against Kanye the artist. Because Kanye the artist is not only a genius, but a brave man.
Amen.
And a lot of people who want to like speak out of turn against Kanye, like he all crazy and y'all all know that. Well, yeah, he was crazy when he told George Bush that he didn't care for black people.
Exactly.
Right? And he risked money. Right? That's when he was on the rise, seen as the next new thing. He risked capital for that. Then when he did this Taylor Swift, I know a lot of, you know, even your president, Obama called him a jackass. You know, Obama was rough with that. I ain't never heard Obama call Toby Keith a jackass. Right? I mean, I never heard Obama call no white people nothing. But the Negro, he called now to his credit, let's defend Obama, he didn't say it in public. That's all right, but he got it in public. You should have said something. You should have said, you know what, that was a personal moment, I'm sorry. When Kanye West went to grab that microphone from Taylor Swift, I was there that night, by the way. What he was saying was basically, I'm tired of black people doing stuff and not getting awarded for it, and white folk get awards for it. Now a lot of people didn't dig that. I remember I texted Jay-Z and I said, you got to tell Kanye he's got to step up, and y'all and the other Negroes got to support him for that. He said, send this to me. I sent it to him, so he sent it to Kanye. That's how I first met Kanye, through Jay, right? So my thing is, I love Kanye's courage and bravery. Now, what he's doing now is whack. What he's doing now is problematic. And in the name of being independent, you ain't independent. I'm gonna tell you something else. I called Kanye and talked to him, and Kim. And Kanye said to me, I'm gonna give you a sense of his idea. Now we talking. He's putting my tweets up on social media, like my text, like, dude, what if I had said something crazy?
Don't say that crazy thing.
That's what I'm saying. It's right up there, right? So he says, I said, sir, I have a magazine that wants to give me 7,500 to 10,000 words to do a story on you. Just me and you, talking, right? Your evolutionary race. Because very few people understand the way I do. I'm going to give you love, but I'm going to also come at you. So I'm talking to him. He goes, give you 7,500 words? That sounds like a slave mentality. That's all right. I said, since I don't own the Mickey Freaky magazine, right? It's not my magazine. It's called New Republic. It's not my magazine, sir. So he's talking. Then he says, I talked to X, Y, and Z. I talked to Van Lathan, that's my guy at TMZ, and then I talked to Charlemagne. I said, both of those are brilliant young men. And I said, but given what I do, I got a book on Nas, got a book on Tupac, no disrespect, I do what I do, I am who I am. Yeah. And he goes, that's the first yay thing you said today. That's the first Kanye thing you said. I was like, bro, I'm older than you. Right? So I'm not yay-zing it up. You Dysonian when you write. He goes, I like that. I said, but here's the problem. I told him a year and a half ago, I said, if you ain't at the dinner table, you on the menu. Why let Donald Trump play you? And I said, Kanye, he's playing you. He's absorbing your capital and using you as a mascot to reinforce white supremacy. And I said, sir, I can't get down. And I love you. And you're a genius. And you will continue to be a genius, but that is problematic, and it subverts your great reputation, yes. So what you did was powerful. It was one of the most powerful things I saw of all the responses. You know, use his words to contradict what he's doing now, and to call him into question. And the white man get paid off of all that, and he is, right? And understanding who Kanye is in terms of Jesus Walks, in terms of crack music, listen to Kanye's lyrics. Some of the most progressive, interesting, and I think, fruitful conversation. Right now, he admitted, he said, my mental illness led me to say this stuff I said. Well, if that's the case, then white supremacy is a mental illness, but I don't even want to make it a mental illness. It's a choice. It's a political option that people exercise, and we can't let you off the hook with the mental illness argument, because fundamentally, we got to talk about who you are as a human being and the choices you make. And collectively, we can't make white supremacy a metaphor, to use a metaphor of mental illness, because now they're sick and they can't help what they do. No, that's a choice that people make. And so I love Kanye, but he may be, he may have exhausted his usefulness at this moment in terms of a political consciousness raising that he used to do. That's all I'm saying.
You saying it that way that's one way of looking at it. Slavery was a choice for slave masters and slave traders.
Come on.
So maybe that's what he meant. Tell him he can clean that up on Twitter. Now we'll take audience questions. Do they need a microphone? I need some guidance from the store. Did they leave?
Did they leave? Wow.
You want the microphone?
Shout it out and then repeat the question. Audience shouts it out and you guys just repeat.
The question. Okay.
Or the mic.
Okay, yeah. You can ask me a right question.
All right. Dr. Dyson, thank you very much for this. Angela, thank you very much for this as well. This is probably in the book, but I'm going to ask a question relative to Bobby. Teach us something about him with respect to what Belafonte said last week, I believe, on NBC, which was Bobby didn't get us, and it wasn't until we had conversation with him, and also it wasn't until Bobby went down to the South and had experienced the South that he came back a changed man.
Right.
Well, what was it that he learned? What was it that he did? And what would he have implemented if he didn't get shot?
Right. Well, first of all, that meeting, thank you for that very powerful question. First of all, the meeting they had was extraordinarily important to him. It was a linchpin. It made him mad. He got mad at the meeting. It was a 3-hour meeting. They shut him down. He tried to talk. As Angela Wright talked about, he was forced to listen. Something very rare for a self-assured, confident white man who thinks he's going to tell you how you should reconstruct your community. At least he was honest about it, right? But they finally shut him down. The young civil rights activist there, Jerome Smith, shut him down. Shut him all the way down. And then, to their credit, when Bobby Kennedy tried to pivot in that meeting away from the wild Negro to the respectable Negroes, Lorraine Hansberry said there are many elite people here, but the only person you should listen to in that room is that man right there. So she sent him right back to him. So he listened for 3 hours. But let me tell you what happened. He got mad. He was angry. He sicked the FBI on them. Right? Bobby Kennedy, a liberal white icon, authorized the dossiers in the FBI from J. Edgar Hoover of the people at that meeting, if they hadn't already been started. Led to, ironically enough, Clarence Jones, who was there, lawyer for both Baldwin and King. Because they were tapping him, they ended up catching King in the net, and Bobby Kennedy authorized the wiretap of Martin Luther King Jr. So let's be real about it first before we come back to what he became. Now, so it was that meeting that changed his mind, though. Then he calmed down. He said, you know what, if I was a Negro, I'd be full of rage too. And then he started telling his brother, speak about race in the moral terms, not just in political terms. Then he changed his own mind about how he approached race as well. So when he went south, he had already been instigated and inspired by that meeting. Had he lived, he would have been much more progressive. But let's not get it twisted. You know, he gave that speech when Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered. He gave it in Indianapolis. He said, he quoted Aeschylus. He talked about the Greek classics. Then he talked about King. And he says, I know you're mad. A white man killed your brother. A white man killed my brother too. Right? Beautiful speech. That night at the hotel, he told his aide, it ain't like it's the worst death in the history of the Republic. So he was complicated because he and King had beef, right? Because King was a straight up, articulator of the goals and aspirations of black people. And even when it came, and you look at the telephone calls between him and Bobby, he was very respectful, but he was assertive. And he said what was on his mind, and he never sold black people out. Now these are conversations you don't know nobody's listening to, right? Nobody. And he never sold us out in a fundamental way. So had Bobby Kennedy lived, he would have become much more progressive, I think, been challenged by existing leadership to hold him to account. He'd never done it on his own. Look at Obama, great president, top 10, but when it came to race, not as great as his other accomplishments. Unless you are held to account, I don't care who you are, any of us, we're not going to do the things we're supposed to do unless there's a vibrant community. That's what it would have happened.
Dr. Dyson, I have a question in regards, well, not really a question, but it's kind of a point. We talked about how the white society kind of plays rural white people against black folks. And we saw in this last election cycle how they went hard at kind of playing us against our Hispanic brothers and really kind of making it seem like they were taking jobs away from us. And they kind of used that context to frame it. And so I want to get like an idea of like, what are your thoughts on that? And how even some Southern black pastors kind of got on that bandwagon and supported Trump kind of based on that and, framing it into this. Yeah.
No, it's a great point. And you're absolutely right. That us versus them again. And the same thing that in the early 1900s, when black workers, scab workers, to replace white folk because unions were trying to break them. So they're trying to dog the white people, so they brought the Negroes in. And then the white people hated the Negroes because they felt you taking our jobs. They did the same thing. What did Trump say? Who's taking your jobs? Letting Mexicans in. They're the ones who are ripping you. First of all, you ain't want that job the Mexican had. Stop lying. You're not getting up that early. You ain't getting up with Jose. Stop lying. Jose is up at 3 a.m. hustling, right? But wait a minute. But you shouldn't have to get up at 3 a.m. with Jose. Jose shouldn't have to do it either. Jose working for $2 an hour. Now you a black person, you done built this nation, you shouldn't have to work for $2 an hour. But don't be mad at Jose. Be mad at the government together that exploits us and practices captains of industry who do so. So for us to fall for the okie doke, and we do it not only economically but culturally about who they are. Now we're not romanticizing people. Even with some Mexican people, when you look at what they bring here, they're American. How do you become American? Hating black people. How do you become American? Hating darker people. So Mexicans bring sets of ideas. Look at the Peter. Look at the figures in their culture who are dark and how they're demonized. I ain't romanticizing that, but I'm saying all of us have to challenge the bigotry from within. And when we look at how they get played, we get played off against each other, it's utterly ridiculous. But think about it, 8% of black men, eligible voters, voted for Donald Trump too. 54% of white women, eligible voters, voted for Donald Trump. Who saved us? Black women. Who will save us? Black women. Who has the potential to rescue us? Black women.
Angela Rye for president.
That's what I talked to about it. Kamala Harris.
Right.
Kamala Harris told me, well, the first thing Kamala Harris, this is a true story. When I was talking to Kamala, she says, you know, do you know Angela Rye? I said, you know, she's my daughter. What are you saying? I want to talk to her. I admire her so much. I'd love to be in contact with her. That's what Kamala Harris said. So maybe y'all run on a ticket together. We'll see. All right.
I'm not running, but I'll be helpful.
All right.
Hi, Angela. Okay, I just wanted to say, first of all, the book that you have, let me look here and just make sure, Tears We Cannot Stop. When we asked about it, not a whole lot of people raised their hand up that they had it. I did. I raised my hand because I have it and I love it. New York bestseller. But I want to thank you for the other work that you do. I actually saw you and see you every January at Susan Taylor's National Cares Mentoring Movement. And you are one of the renowned leaders of that movement and helping young African-American men find mentors and role models. And I just want to publicly thank you for that effort and thank you for working towards that for our community.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. If y'all got a question for Angela Rye, please ask her. She's going to be leaving soon, so ask her some questions.
Good evening. Thank you for coming to Seattle. And I bought your other book too, gave it to my granddaughter. I collect your books for her.
Well, thank you.
My oldest granddaughter, she's a senior down at Agnes Scott.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, down in Atlanta. Yes, and she's a poet. And so anyway, all the books I collect. But I grew up in the bowels of segregation. If you start getting figures, I never had a white teacher in my life, and I never went to a public library, and I never had a new book.
Right.
We got the old books after the white students. We got the new books. That's how it was in Central Florida. I grew up in Sanford, Florida. Everybody knows that town now.
Right.
That's where Trayvon Martin was murdered at. But I want you to just talk a little bit about how what we see today is a rerun of what has been before. I mean, they called us niggas on the radio when I grew up in Central Florida. I mean, you know, and the white, my grandmother, when the Klan was riding, she stayed at her own home, you know, and she said she'd just take her anybody who came on her property. So my people didn't run from the Klan. But anyway, could you just talk about, this is a rerun of what's been in America, and for people say, oh, I didn't know America was like this. Well, and separating the children, the immigrants' children from the parents, from the mothers. I mean, they did that with slaves. I mean, you know, with our ancestors, you know, we're the stolen ones. So can you just kind of say how this time kind of is a rerun from the past?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, point Angela Rye made on the television last night. You're so right. I grew up in Jim Crow too, but I was up north Jim Crow, in Detroit, de facto Jim Crow. My mama, daddy, mama from Georgia, mama from Alabama, daddy from Georgia. We went down south, as we said, stopped Tennessee. I'm big, why can't we stop at the restaurants? Why are we always using the mason jar under the seat to relieve ourselves in it? Bathrooms? How come we got paper bags and boxes of sandwiches, right? Finally gave in one day, you know, you're trying to explain to the kid why we can't, so he stopped. Guy said, we don't serve niggas in here. Asked my mother, what's a nigga? Right? So what you experienced, right? And then no white teachers, no white world at all in the deep south and up south, right? Up south in the north, because Chicago ain't nothing but a suburb of Mississippi. And Detroit, suburb of Georgia, Alabama. North Carolina Negroes went up to New York. Texas Negroes went across to California. That's why Snoop Dogg talks that way. Falling back on that ass with a hellified gangster link. Getting fucking on the mic like an old batch of collard greens. That's that Calabama accent. So what you have here then, you can trace the Great Migration through our sounds. So it is a rerun. You know, Boy Vidal, the great writer, said we live in the United States of amnesia. Right? That's where we are. And Barbra Streisand supplies the theme song. What's too painful to remember? We simply choose to forget. So we forget. That's why it's important to have a social justice warrior, brilliant intellectual, and barrister, esquire, lawyer, on the front line, speaking back to people, telling them the truth that they don't want to hear. America's addicted to the history in one sense, right? How many reenactments of the Civil War are we going to have? How many more books on Abraham Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson and the Founding Fathers and Founding Brothers? They love it, I ain't mad. But boy, when it comes to us, stop. Why y'all still, wait, enough. Get over it. Get over your past. So it is a rerun, but who's the sponsor and who's the syndicator? Right? It's a rerun, all right, but the tiki torch carrying people that President Trump says are good people on both sides, right? When you think about that, we have to resist and reject that and the normalization of it. And I'm disappointed in white folk who normalize that guy every day. The Republican Party should be ashamed of itself. The Republican Party says, as long as our economic wherewithal is great, we don't mind him hurting black people, being Nazis and neo-fascists, crypto-fascists. If Obama had drank a black Russian drink in the White House, they'd have put him out. And you got a guy up in there in bed with extraneous gases, Putin. Right there, right? With this dude, right? In bed with him. So I think that what we have to do, we have to become members of a remembrance of the things we have to do. That's why when Angela Rye told that story, but let me tell you what, when she said Dr. King was at the low point, a lot of people don't know that. See, we don't even know our own story. We don't know our own truth. We don't know our own. And this is why I argue, even when people come up to me, yeah, you know, you on that King tip, but Malcolm was, I said, Malcolm was a great man, but Malcolm was in Harlem.
Yeah.
The fight was in Birmingham. It's easy to talk on the castle wall. Get out there in the forest. And I love Malcolm X. I got a book on it. Read it. But I'm going to tell you this thing. And Malcolm finally did his life. He said, man, these integrations are far braver than I knew. You know why? Because you up in Harlem on 135th. When people going, yeah, speak it. And when he went to Alabama, finally, King was in jail. He said, he told Mrs. King, tell Dr. King, I do what I do so they can see what the option is and the alternative is. But you're not having police dogs bite into your flesh. You don't have water hoses wash against you. He called King a coward for letting women and children do that, but the Nation of Islam wasn't going to take their place. See, so we got to be real with that. And if you ain't going to take their place and you're not going to speak up, what you talking? That's my point. So that's the rerun we have to be honest about. And for those black people who told me, and I'm in on this point, ain't no difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I debated him on TV. I ain't going to call his name. I got him in my book. That's my brother. I love him. How you going to say ain't no difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? Now, Hillary got some problems, but I tell you what. So she ain't likable. She ain't trying to be your woman. She got a man. Right? And Angela Rye was brilliant last night in trying to both hold Bill Clinton to account while looking at the kind of age and generational expressions. And part of it is, I think, some illness too, whatever he's dealing with. But the reality is that out of touch with what's going on right now. But when you think about the deep and profound differences between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, the irresponsibility of the black left too, we have to be held to account as well. So yeah, that memory is extremely important.
Well, for me, growing up as a young black male in America, I'm sorry if you cannot hear me well, I'm fasting Ramadan today, almost breaking the fast. Growing up as a young black male in America and as a former refugee child from Somalia, and I grew up as your fan, by the way, I always had a question for you. And that was the intersection of colonization and slavery. And before I ask my question, I remember my best professor has always been my dad, even though he only had a third grade education. Right. He couldn't go higher because he grew up during colonization.
Right.
He said that the scramble of Africa was not perfected when King Leopold II in the 1890s, scrambled Africa,
Right.
tore it up into pieces. He said it was actually perfected after we received our independence, after colonization, because we started scrambling ourselves.
Right.
Now, the reason for that is that's why I'm in America today. In the early 90s, there was tribalism in Somalia, and people killed each other just because of power, right? Same people, same language, same color, same religion, everything, right? So I wanted to know, are my fellow black folks in America going through the same things that my people are going through in Africa, whereby the unity is just horrible? And if I, as a black man in America, and I see no hope back home in Somalia, I cannot even visit because it's not safe. How do I see my black folks in America?
No, sir, that's a great point. Thank God you're here, brother. God bless you. You know, it was Frederick Douglass, right, working at the intersection of slavery and the recolonization of black folk, trying to send us back, right, recolonize us to Africa. He said, reading, literacy, unfits a child for slavery, right, because it's not the physical chains, the mental ones, right, right? So literacy, reading, unfits a child for slavery. George Clinton put it this way: free your mind and your ass will follow. That's the Frederick Douglass update. So, decolonizing the mind is critical. This is what Ms. Rye, too kind, in speaking about Kanye, a colonized mind, right? Some of us want to go to Freedom School on Pharaoh Scholarship. Right? I mean, so the reality is we're buying into, look at the stories in the biblical text about the three, Shadrach, Meshach, and they used to say a bad Negro. But they don't bow down, right? They don't bow down. They refuse to bow down to play the tune of the dominant culture. So yeah, it is true that there are waves of colonization. Right? Read Frantz Fanon to think about that. Right? Black skin, white mask. Fanon, F-A-N-O-N. Frantz, F-R-A-N-T-Z, died at 38 years old, Martinique psychiatrist. Right? Jean-Paul Sartre wrote the introduction to the text. So, The Wretched of the Earth, the great masterwork, arguably, of Dr. Fanon. But he talked about the psychological consequences of colonialization and colonizing, and we can't forget some of the most expert colonizers, as you pointed out, happen to be black folk themselves, right? This is ventriloquism. Some of the most effective patriarchs have skirts, right? Female mouth moving, masculine ideas spoken, right? So you're a ventriloquist, you throwing your voice over there. So the point is that with colonized, of course there's going to be the fact that, first of all, black folk who sold us, black folk who manufactured the means by which we could be produced as chattel, even though they don't bear responsibility in the West, and then the ways in which it infected every culture. People say, well, how you going to be a Christian because I'm Muslim and this other. Well, remember the Berbers? Remember what happened when slavery infected every religion, because the real religion in the West is whiteness, right? So, yes, there are many, many parallels between the experiences of people of color, especially Africans and African Americans, who are striving to be independent and free of the encroachment of thinking about things in a way that is destructive to them. But at the end of the day, I think your point about, and to go back to what we were talking about before, about unity, you got to forge connection with people who understand who you are. If anything out of Africa teaches us, right, when people romanticize Africa, it's a nation, right, it's not a country, no, it's a darn continent, is the beautiful differences that obtain. Only in an artificial environment is unity required, right? Think about it. You go to college that's mostly white, there's some black folk you're going to get down with at school you would never get down with if you was just like in your natural habitat. See what I'm saying? So the situation and circumstance determines and dictates the need for reciprocal engagement, right? You know, we're going to hang out. I'd have never hung with you on the real tip, but since we in this foreign environment, I'm going to get down with you. That lets you know already, right, what did Zordon Hurston say? All kinfolk ain't your skinfolk, all your skinfolk ain't your kinfolk. All my kin ain't my kind, all my kind ain't my kin, right? So you gotta find them, you gotta forge connections with them. That's why King understood ultimately that you can never exclude white brothers and sisters, because some of the most progressive people who will defend black identity against the encouragement of white folk, and should be, John Brown, on down, right? Tim Wise today in terms of whiteness studies, Mav Segrist, Theodore Allen, The Invention of the White Race, Noel Ignatieff, what's the name of his book? Everybody know about it? About the Irish, right? How the Irish became white. Then there's a subsequent book, How the Jews Became White. Because whiteness is the dominant matrix into which is poured every ethnic identity. See, when and I'll end by here. See, when white folk came here, they were Irish, Italian, Polish, Jewish. They had their own ethnic identity. But in America, they're pulverized as white. It gets reduced, right? People who are fighting each other now together. Think about it. The infusion in America, late 1800s, early 1900s. Polish, Jews, Italians, in the ghetto, the shtetl, right? Why do you think it's called the paddy wagon? Because, right, Irish people who got drunk on Saturday, stereotyped as more likely to do harm. But what happened? America said, through smart professors, social engineers, and other activists, these are our brothers and sisters, we ain't gonna let them go down to two. But they let us go down to two. And colonizing makes us believe that we're not worth the effort to love each other. And that's the chain we gotta break. That's the ultimate chain we gotta break. That's a great point.
That's all the questions. I'm sure like many of you, I still have like 10 questions. So please take your question and your book to be signed to this table that's right over here. We thank you all so much. Let's please give Dr. Dyson a round of applause. Thank you all so much for your time.
Let's take our hands all right. Come on down. If you could please stay seated for a moment, just to let our speakers get to the table. If you could just take a seat for a moment.